In the most feared empire of the galaxy, there was an unspoken rule older than war itself. No one made unnecessary noise in the presence of the queen. Silence was obedience. Silence was survival. I didn't know that rule. I was alone, tired, and far from Earth, and I was humming a song I barely remembered. By the time I realized someone was listening, an immortal ruler had stopped walking, an empire was holding its breath, and I had already changed something I could never undo. I had learned two important survival rules since arriving in the Imperial Core. Never run unless everyone else is running, and never ask what something is made of if it's humming back at you. The palace followed neither rule. It hummed constantly, a low vibration underfoot and inside the skull, like the building itself was thinking very slowly and very seriously about something it did not intend to share. I wasn't supposed to be there at that hour. That was fine. I was rarely supposed to be anywhere I ended up. The official explanation was that I was a cultural preservation auxiliary, which sounded impressive until you realized it meant the human who knows how to label boxes without starting an incident. My task that night involved a storage wing so old that even the Empire's archivists treated it like an embarrassing relative. Acknowledged, avoided, and never spoken of at formal gatherings. The corridor lights adjusted to my steps, brightening reluctantly, as if offended I was still alive and moving. I muttered an apology to no one in particular. Talking to myself had become a habit ever since I learned most of the palace's automated systems could, in theory, understand me. Whether they cared was another matter. I catalogued in silence for a while. Silence was the palace's favorite state. Silence was safe. Silence didn't ask questions or hum back. Unfortunately, silence also reminded me I was very far from home, surrounded by beings who could calculate my skeletal density with a glance. That was usually when my brain did what it always did under pressure. It reached for something stupid and familiar. I didn't even notice I was humming at first. It was soft, barely there, a fragment of an old song my mother used to half sing while burning dinner. No words, just a wandering melody that had survived childhood, gravity wells, and several questionable career decisions. I told myself it didn't count as noise. It was more like emotional leakage. The corridor reacted. Not dramatically. No alarms, no sudden appearance of armed guards. The hum just lingered. The sound didn't bounce or fade the way it should have. It stretched, as if the air had decided to hold on to it for a moment longer than polite physics allowed. I stopped humming mid-note, my throat doing that unpleasant tightening thing reserved for people who realize too late they might have broken an interstellar law they never bothered translating. "Well," I whispered, "if anyone asks, that was a diagnostic." Nothing happened. Encouraged by this overwhelming lack of consequences, I resumed humming, quieter this time, like I was sneaking snacks in a room full of sleeping predators. I told myself it was ridiculous to be nervous. This wing was abandoned, forgotten. Even the walls looked bored. Somewhere far above me, the palace listened. I didn't know that yet. I was busy trying to convince myself that the strange warmth creeping into my chest was nostalgia and not imminent doom. The melody wandered, dipped, rose again. It wasn't particularly good. That was the point. Perfect things made people uncomfortable. Imperfect things just existed, unapologetically off-key. I reached the end of the corridor and turned, still humming, and nearly collided with a surface that absolutely had not been there before. I froze. The hum died in my throat. My brain helpfully suggested several options, none of which involved survival. The air felt heavier, like the gravity had leaned in for a better look. I became very aware of my hands, my breathing, and the fact that I had not updated my will. She stood there without ceremony, without guards, without the subtle sound cues that usually preceded imperial authority. Purple skin caught the corridor's light in a way that made it seem deeper than color, more like a presence. Long ears swept back from her head, elegant and still, and her blonde hair fell loose around her shoulders, unbound by any visible symbol of rank. I recognized her anyway. Everyone did. You didn't need an introduction when the universe itself seemed to straighten its posture. My first coherent thought was that I should bow. My second was that I had no idea how far one was supposed to bow to an immortal queen, and whether doing it wrong would get me executed or politely erased from all records. I compromised by doing nothing, which has always been humanity's most dangerous reflex. She looked at me as if I were a problem she hadn't known she wanted to solve. Her eyes weren't angry. That somehow made it worse. "You were making a sound," she said. "Yes," I replied, because lying felt ambitious. "I often do that." Silence pressed in, curious now. I realized with a jolt that the palace hum had changed pitch, aligning itself subtly with the echo of my aborted melody. I laughed once, short and involuntary. It slipped out before I could stop it. "I'm not usually this audible," I added. "I can stop. I'm very good at stopping." Her gaze didn't waver. "Why would you?" That question hit harder than any threat. I opened my mouth, closed it, tried again. "Because I'm not important?" It was meant as a joke. It came out softer than intended. Something shifted, not in the palace, in her. The weight in the air wavered, like gravity reconsidering its loyalties. She stepped closer. I did not step back, mostly because my legs had decided to file a formal protest and refuse all cooperation. "What was the sound for?" she asked. I swallowed. "It's not for anything. It's just what happens when humans forget to be quiet." Her long ears tilted forward slightly. I had read enough xenobiology briefings to know that meant attention, possibly danger. Possibly both. She studied my face as if mapping something fragile. "Continue," she said. I blinked. "You want me to sing?" The word seemed to amuse her. One corner of her mouth lifted, almost imperceptibly. "You were not singing. You were remembering." That did it. Against all reason, I hummed again. The melody returned, hesitant at first, then steadier. The corridor warmed. The palace hum aligned fully now, harmonizing in a way that made my skin prickle. I could feel it in my ribs, in my teeth. I laughed again, breathless this time. "Okay," I murmured. "That's new." Her breath caught. I noticed because queens were not supposed to have audible reactions to anything, least of all a nervous human leaking childhood through his vocal cords. Her eyes shimmered, unfocused, as if the corridor had receded and taken centuries with it. When she reached for me, it wasn't commanding. It was instinctive. Her arms wrapped around me, careful and uncertain, as though I might shatter or disappear. I stiffened, then relaxed, because at that point the list of things I could control was very short and getting shorter. Her forehead rested against mine. Her shoulders shook once. She laughed. Then she cried. I stood there, embraced by the most powerful being in the empire, humming softly because stopping felt like it might break something important. Somewhere in the palace, protocols unraveled quietly. Somewhere in the galaxy, nothing exploded. Which, all things considered, felt like a miracle. I learned very quickly that there are no training modules for what to do when an immortal alien monarch is crying into your shoulder. My first instinct was to pat her back. My second instinct was that patting a queen, any queen, let alone one whose species once conquered 3-star clusters by accident, was probably a fast track to historical footnote status. I compromised again, because compromise was clearly my brand, and settled for standing very still while continuing to hum like a malfunctioning appliance. Her grip tightened, then loosened, as if she were testing whether this moment was real or something the palace had fabricated to keep her occupied. Her tears were warm. That detail lodged itself into my brain and refused to leave. Queens, in my experience, were supposed to cry metaphorically, if at all. "I apologize," she said eventually, her voice steady again, which somehow made the words more alarming. "This is inappropriate." "Oh," I said. "If it helps, I've been inappropriate in far less impressive situations." She pulled back just enough to look at me. Her eyes were still bright, but focused now, sharp and ancient and very awake. I felt like a bug that had accidentally told a joke to a god and was now waiting to see if it would be rewarded or smote. "You are not afraid," she said. I considered lying. "I am extremely afraid. I'm just tired. Fear gets heavy after a while." That earned me another small laugh from her, surprised and unguarded. The sound echoed down the corridor, and somewhere deep in the palace something mechanical hesitated, recalculating reality. "What is your designation?" she asked. I gave it. Then, because the universe was clearly off balance already, I added, "You don't have to remember it. Most people don't." "I will remember," she said, and I believed her in a way that made my stomach do an unpleasant somersault. We stood there longer than protocol would ever allow. No guards arrived. No alarms protested. The palace hum softened, settling into something almost companionable. I became uncomfortably aware that the queen was studying me not as a subject, but as a phenomenon, like gravity or poor life choices. "You use sound as comfort," she said, "not as signal, not as command. Sometimes as warning," I offered, "usually when we're about to do something stupid." "Your species does many stupid things," she said thoughtfully. "We like to stay consistent." That did it. She laughed again, fully this time, and the tension snapped like a filament under too much charge. The laugh surprised her as much as it did me. She brought a hand to her mouth, long fingers trembling slightly, as if laughter itself were a forgotten reflex stretching muscles long unused. "I have ruled for a very long time," she said. "Long enough that most reactions are managed." "Managed how?" She gestured vaguely, and the air responded, projecting faint geometric patterns, neural dampeners, emotional regulators, entire technologies designed to keep a ruler stable, eternal, unshakable. Science fiction made real and quietly terrifying. "That seems exhausting," I said before thinking. She tilted her head. "It is efficient. Those aren't the same thing." Her long ears angled toward me again. "No," she admitted, "they are not." She turned and began walking, not away, past me. I hesitated, then followed, because apparently I had reached the stage of my career where following queens into unknown palace depths felt normal. The corridor reshaped itself as we moved, lights warming, gravity easing. The palace was adapting to her mood. That alone was enough to make historians cry for entirely different reasons. "Why do humans sing?" she asked. I shrugged. "Why do stars burn?" She stopped, looked at me. "They burn because they must." "Exactly." She considered that, then nodded slowly. "Continue walking," she said, and we did. As we moved deeper, I noticed subtle changes. Windows where there had been walls, views into space that curved impossibly, showing constellations I didn't recognize. The palace wasn't just architecture. It was a thinking system, ancient and proud and currently very confused. "You are aware," she said, "that what you did could be interpreted as an act of influence." I hummed, I said, "Poorly. You altered my emotional state." "I do that to myself all the time, usually with less success." Another almost smile. "If my court knew, they would demand inquiry, safeguards, restrictions. On me or on singing?" "Both," I grimaced. "We tried banning music once. It didn't go well." She glanced at me. "Your history contains many failed prohibitions. We learn by running headfirst into walls, sometimes repeatedly." We reached a chamber that felt smaller, not in size but in intent. The palace quieted here. No projections, no hum, just us, and the faint echo of the melody still clinging to the air like a memory refusing to dissipate. She sat, not on a throne. On a simple platform, legs drawn in slightly, posture relaxed in a way no official portrait would ever allow. She gestured for me to sit as well. I did, carefully, as if sudden movements might summon destiny. "When I was newly crowned," she said, "my people celebrated for a decade. Sound filled every world, then it stopped." "Why?" "Because celebration implies an end, my reign does not." That landed heavily. I scratched my cheek, buying time. "That sounds lonely." Her gaze didn't leave the far wall. "Loneliness is an inefficient term, but yes." Silence returned gentler now. I felt the hum itching at the back of my throat again. "May I asked." She nodded, I hummed. Softer than before, simpler. The palace didn't harmonize this time, it listened. The queen closed her eyes, her shoulders eased just a fraction, but enough. "I will not forget this," she said quietly, "and that troubles me." Good trouble or bad trouble? She opened her eyes, purple skin catching the low light, blonde hair slipping forward as she smiled, small, real, human in its imperfection. "That," she said, "remains to be determined." By the time I left the quiet chamber, the palace had decided several things without consulting me. The lighting followed at a respectful distance, like it wasn't sure whether I outranked it now. The gravity felt a fraction lighter, which I told myself was psychological and absolutely not, because I had emotionally destabilized an ancient ruling intelligence. I fully expected guards to appear the moment I stepped back into a public corridor. Instead, a pair of Imperial sentinels glanced at me, hesitated, and then very deliberately looked away. One of them cleared his throat in what might have been a salute or might have been allergies. It was hard to tell with alien physiology. This was new. I walked faster because nothing good ever comes from lingering after something unprecedented. My internal monologue helpfully listed possible outcomes: diplomatic immunity, quiet execution, becoming a religious symbol, or being asked to hum on command at state events. I didn't like my odds on any of them. The summons arrived 3 hours later, delivered by a hovering construct that looked like a floating apology. It informed me I was requested, not ordered, by the Queen. The wording alone caused 3 analysts in the room with me to faint in unison. I apologized to them and followed the apology drone, because at that point my life had clearly gone off the rails and was enjoying the view. The throne chamber was full this time. Advisors, nobles, strategists, beings whose lifespans measured in geological epochs. The Queen stood at the center, crown restored, posture immaculate. The air buzzed with restrained tension so thick I could have sliced it and sold it as a luxury product. She raised one hand. Silence fell instantly. "I will speak plainly," she said. "This human has committed no crime." Several faces twitched, a few ears angled sharply. Somewhere a legal framework began to weep. "He will not be detained, studied, restricted, or silenced," she continued. "He will be invited." Every eye turned to me. I gave a small wave. It seemed polite. "There are forces in this universe that conquer," she said, "and forces that endure. There are also forces that remind us why endurance matters." Her gaze softened just a fraction when it met mine. This one reminded me. No one argued. That, more than anything, told me how deeply things had shifted. After that, things became strange in a quieter way. I was not promoted. I was not elevated. I was simply included. Invited to walk with her through parts of the palace no one else used. Asked questions that had nothing to do with policy. Why humans laughed at funerals. Why we told the same stories over and over even when we knew how they ended. Why we sang when there was nothing to gain. I answered honestly. Sometimes badly. Sometimes with jokes that made her blink and then laugh days later, as if the humor needed time to translate. The palace changed around us. Not dramatically. Just enough. Corridors no longer suppressed sound entirely. Public spaces allowed small, unregulated gatherings. Someone somewhere played music, not human, not alien, but something in between. No one stopped it. The Queen did not abdicate. Empires did not crumble. She ruled as she always had, decisively, brilliantly. But now she ruled as someone who remembered what it felt like to be held together by something fragile. As for me, I stopped humming out of fear and started doing it on purpose. Not loudly, not often, but when silence grew too heavy, I let it crack. One evening, standing beside her as stars drifted past the vast viewport, she asked, "If you were not afraid that first night, what were you?" I thought about it, about home, about the song, about how small I had felt and how that smallness had somehow mattered. "I was human," I said. She nodded. "Then remain so." I did, and the galaxy